Hey, I'm Alex. I'm 24 and I live in a small town just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I've always loved working with my hands. While most of my friends went to college or jumped into office jobs, I spent 5 years saving every dollar I could and learning everything about landscaping. My dream? To open my own lawn care and landscaping business. And finally, a few months ago, I did it. It's nothing fancy yet. I got an old white Ford van that rattles when I started, a secondhand mower I fixed up myself, a few trimmers, and the cheapest leaf blower money can buy. But they work. That's all I needed to get started. I named my business Greenline Yard Services, even printed some flyers myself. At first, my only clients were family and a couple of neighbors. I wasn't making money, not really. I did it mostly for free or whatever they could pay. I knew I had to build a name. I told myself, do every job like it's $1 million project. That's how you get noticed. One afternoon, I was sitting at my tiny desk at home, going through my tools and wondering if I'd ever get a real client. My phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello. A soft but confident voice answered. Hi. I was given your number by my neighbor. I'm looking for someone to take care of my lawn. Are you available? I sat straight up. Yes, absolutely. I can stop by tomorrow if that works. She gave me her address. When I hung up, I just stared at the phone for a second. That was it. My first real job. The next morning, I packed up my equipment into the van. My heart was racing as I pulled up to the house. It was a large, beautifully maintained property in one of the nicest neighborhoods around. Elegant, but not over the top. The kind of place where every blade of grass had to be perfect. As I got out of the van, I took a deep breath and reminded myself, do the work. Be professional. I rang the doorbell. After a few seconds, she opened the door. I remember that first impression clearly. She looked like she was in her early 40s, tall, poised, dressed casually, but in a way that said she had taste and probably money. Her dark hair was pulled back, simple earrings, no makeup except for light lipstick. Hi, I'm Rachel, she said with a smile. You must be Alex? Yes, ma'am. Thank you for calling me. No need to call me ma'am, she laughed lightly. Just Rachel. She walked me around the property, pointing out areas she wanted cleaned up and mowed. The last guy just stopped showing up, she explained. I like things neat and tidy. I nodded, taking mental notes. I'll make sure it looks better than ever. I got to work right away. It was a hot day, and I could feel sweat dripping down my back within minutes. My mower sputtered a little starting up, but it got the job done. I trimmed, edged, and made sure every line was perfect. I even took care of a few weeds along the path without her asking. At some point, I looked up and saw her standing on the porch, watching me. I waved awkwardly and kept going. About an hour later, as I was finishing the last strip of grass near the side yard, she walked over. I turned off the mower and wiped my forehead with my sleeve. That looks amazing, she said, looking over the freshly cut lawn. You really do care about the details. Thank you. I try to treat every yard like it's my own. Then, with a playful smirk, she tilted her head and said the words I'll never forget. Careful. I get attached to hard workers. I chuckled, a little caught off guard, unsure if she was joking or serious. I'll keep that in mind. She smiled warmly. I'll send the payment through your website, but I'll definitely be calling you again soon. I packed up my tools, waved goodbye, and drove away feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this business was going to work. 3 days went by. I kept myself busy doing small jobs for friends of friends, trimming hedges, edging driveways, even pulling weeds by hand when I had to. I was still grinding, still trying to get any work I could. Every evening I'd check my phone, hoping for an inquiry, but nothing. I tried not to get discouraged. I kept reminding myself, you're just getting started. Then, on Thursday morning, my phone rang. It was her, Rachel. I stared at the screen for a second before answering. Hello. Hi, Alex. It's Rachel. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Not at all. What can I do for you? I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I was wondering if you might be able to stop by again. The front hedges and bushes are getting a little wild. No one seems to trim them quite right. And I really like how you handle the lawn. Could you help me out? Of course. I can be there this afternoon if that works. Perfect. I hung up, staring at the phone again. It wasn't just a one-time job. I had a returning client. A good one. I threw my tools in the back of the van and headed over. As I pulled into her driveway, I noticed how perfect everything looked, except the hedges. I grabbed my trimmers and started working immediately. The hedges were dense and tall, clearly neglected for weeks before my last visit. I wanted to impress her again, not just for the money, but because I was building my name. After about 40 minutes of focused trimming, I noticed Rachel standing nearby, arms crossed loosely, watching me work. She had on casual workout clothes, hair tied back, looking effortlessly stylish. "You really are meticulous," she commented as I stepped back to check my lines. "Attention to detail is everything in this business," I said. She smiled. "Not everyone thinks that way." We chatted a little more as I worked. It was light, easy small talk, whether the neighborhood, even how bad the previous landscaper had been. But I couldn't help noticing how comfortable she seemed talking with me. I kept my focus on the job, though, trimming and shaping each bush just right. As I finished the last hedge, she walked over, looking pleased. "Alex, you've done it again. They look better than I imagined." I smiled, genuinely proud of my work. "Thank you, Rachel. I'm glad you're happy with it." Then, unexpectedly, she hesitated a moment before saying, "I know it's last minute, but I made too much food for dinner. Would you like to stay and eat? Just as a thank you. You must be starving after working in this heat." I blinked, caught off guard. It wasn't common for clients to invite me in. I wasn't sure what to say, but she gave me a warm, reassuring look like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'd love to, but I wouldn't want to impose," I replied politely. "Nonsense," she waved it off. "It's just dinner. Come on, take a break for once." Something about the way she said it made me relax a little. I nodded. "All right, thank you." I packed away my equipment and followed her inside. Her home was just as beautiful on the inside as it was outside. Tasteful, modern, but cozy, with large windows that filled the rooms with soft, natural light. Rachel led me into the kitchen where the table was already set for two. She had prepared grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread. It smelled incredible. We sat and ate. The conversation flowed easier than I expected. She asked about my business, how I started, what my goals were. I told her the truth, that I was barely breaking even, still using borrowed tools, and hoping one day to have a full crew and a proper truck with my company logo on it. "You've got drive," she said with a soft smile. "Most people your age don't." I shrugged, slightly embarrassed. "I'm just trying to build something for myself." After dinner, she opened a bottle of wine and offered me a glass. I politely declined, mentioning I still had to drive home. "I respect that," she nodded. Not many would have said no. We sat there a little longer just talking. It was strange, but not uncomfortable. There was no pressure, just an unexpected ease between two people from very different worlds. As the sun began to set, I stood and thanked her for the meal. "Thank you, Rachel, for everything." She walked me to the door. I meant what I said earlier. "I'll probably find a few more things around here for you to fix soon," she teased lightly. I chuckled. I looked forward to it. Driving home that night, I kept thinking about how surreal the day had felt. I didn't know what it meant, if anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe my life was about to change in ways I never expected. The following week passed by in a blur of small jobs and long hours. I had picked up a couple of extra clients in the neighborhood thanks to Rachel's recommendation. Word travels fast in these communities, and people like my attention to detail. I was grateful, but the work was exhausting. Then came Friday afternoon. I was wrapping up a hedge trimming job when my phone buzzed. It was her. "Hey, Alex, are you free tomorrow?" I wiped sweat from my forehead and smiled. "I think I can be." "What's up?" "My backyard needs a bit of help. The garden looks overgrown, and I know you'll make it perfect." I agreed without hesitation. Rachel had become my best paying and most loyal client. I'd be lying if I said I didn't look forward to working at her place. There was something calming about her home, her energy. The next morning, I loaded my tools into the van and headed over. As I pulled into her driveway, I noticed her standing on the front steps, waving with a smile. She was wearing casual jeans and a fitted white shirt. Simple, elegant, effortlessly graceful like always. "Morning, Alex," she greeted me. "Morning, Rachel. Where do you want me to start?" We walked around to the backyard together. The space was large and well-designed, but clearly needed some love. Shrubs were growing wildly, flowers were tangled, and weeds had claimed the stone pathways. "I know it's a lot," she admitted. "Take your time. I'm around if you need anything. I gotta work." The sun was high and relentless. Sweat poured down my back as I trimmed, pulled, raked, and shaped everything into order. I worked for hours without even thinking about the time. Occasionally, I caught Rachel watching me from the kitchen window or stepping out with a glass of iced tea to offer me. I declined at first, focused on finishing the job, but eventually gave in when she insisted. "Come on, Alex," she said, handing me the cold glass. "Even the hardest workers need a break." I sat on the back steps for a few minutes, sipping the cold drink and staring out at the half-finished garden. Rachel sat down next to me. "You're really dedicated to this," she said softly. I nodded. "It's my name on the business. I want people to remember me for good work." She smiled at that. "Well, you're doing just that." I went back to work and finished the job by early evening. The transformation was undeniable. The hedges were perfect, the flowers neat, the weeds gone. It looked like a completely different backyard. Rachel came out and gasped in delight. "Alex, it's beautiful. You've outdone yourself." "Thank you," I said, brushing dirt from my gloves. Then came the unexpected moment. She paused, almost hesitant, then said, "Listen, I know it's not usual, but would you like to stay for dinner? It's just me here, and I made way too much food. Consider it a small thank you." I hesitated, caught off guard again, the same way I had been before. This wasn't standard client behavior, but something about her tone, the casual ease, made it feel natural. "Sure," I replied after a moment. "Thank you." I packed up my tools and followed her inside. Her home felt different in the evening light. Warm, inviting, peaceful. Soft music played from a speaker in the living room. The smell of roasted chicken and vegetables filled the air. We sat at the kitchen table again. The conversation picked up where we had left off last time. I told her about my childhood, my decision to start my own company, the struggles of running a business with barely any money. Rachel listened intently, occasionally nodding, asking thoughtful questions. It didn't feel like an interview. It felt like two people genuinely getting to know each other. "You're very brave, you know," she said at one point. "Most people wouldn't take the risk. I don't know if it's brave or just stubborn." I laughed. We finished dinner, and she opened another bottle of wine. "I know you won't drink because you're driving, but I'm having a glass anyway," she teased playfully. I smiled. Fair enough. It was dark by the time I stood to leave. I thanked her again for everything. As I walked toward the front door, she followed me and rested her hand lightly on my arm for just a second. "I meant what I said. You'll be hearing from me again," she said softly. I nodded, unsure what to say. My heart was racing slightly, though I wasn't sure why. "Good night, Rachel." "Good night, Alex." I stepped out into the cool night air, climbed into my van, and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. Something about that evening felt like the start of something new. I didn't know what, but I wasn't going to overthink it. I just smiled to myself and drove home. The following weeks turned into a pattern. I continued building my business, taking any job I could find. My days started early and ended late. But every time Rachel called, I made sure to fit her in. Not just because she paid well, but because I genuinely enjoyed the work and, if I was honest, the conversations. Rachel wasn't like any client I had ever worked for. There was something effortless about her, calm but confident. Every time I arrived at her place, she greeted me with that warm smile that made the hours of hard labor seem easier. On one of those late summer afternoons, she had called again. "Hi, Alex. I know you must be busy, but my patio needs a serious power wash. The last guy I hired did a terrible job. I'll be there tomorrow," I said without hesitation. The next day, I loaded my old rented power washer into my van and headed over. The sun was blazing as I dragged the heavy machine across her stone patio. As I worked, Rachel stepped outside with 2 cold bottles of water. "You're gonna melt out here," she joked, handing me one. "I've had worse." I grinned, wiping the sweat from my brow. She lingered nearby, casually watching me work. Our conversations were still light and friendly, but I could feel something shifting between us. Little moments, little looks. "You know," she said at one point, leaning on the patio railing. "I've never had anyone put so much care into my yard. You really love what you do." I nodded, still focused on blasting years of dirt from the stones. "I'm building something. Every job matters." She was quiet for a moment. "It shows." When I finished, the patio looked brand new. I packed up my gear, exhausted but satisfied. "That looks incredible," she said, walking across the freshly cleaned stones. "You've earned a break. Would you like to come in for a bit?" The way she said it wasn't flirty, not exactly. It was casual, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. I hesitated only for a second. "Sure." Inside, she offered me a seat at the kitchen counter while she poured herself a glass of wine. I took a bottle of water from the fridge instead. We talked about life, about work, about how she used to be married years ago, but had been single for a while. There was no bitterness when she spoke, just honesty. I told her about my parents' small house, how my father had taught me to fix things with my hands when I was a kid, how I dreamed of one day buying my own place. "I think you'll get there," she said with quiet certainty. It was getting late. I stood to leave, but Rachel walked me to the door. Then, just before I stepped outside, she caught me off guard. "I've been thinking," she began, looking me straight in the eye. "You don't have to say yes, but I've been considering investing in your business. I can see how much this means to you, and I believe in what you're doing." I froze. I wasn't expecting that. "Rachel, that's incredibly generous, but I don't know if I can accept something like that." She smiled gently. "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. I want to help." I stood there for a second, feeling completely thrown. No one had ever offered me that kind of support before. I nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." "Thank you, Rachel." "Of course," she said softly. "Good night, Alex." "Good night." I walked back to my van, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to say no immediately. I had built this company on my own, after all. But another part of me knew this could change everything. The new equipment, a newer van, the ability to take on bigger jobs. I drove home in silence, the weight of the offer heavy in my chest. I knew I needed time to think. The next few days were some of the hardest I've faced since starting my business. I barely slept. My mind kept spinning through the possibilities. On one hand, I'd worked for everything I had. I had taken pride in building my company from nothing, even if it was still small and struggling. On the other hand, Rachel's offer was real, and it could change everything overnight. By Wednesday, I knew I had to talk to her. I called and asked if I could stop by. "Of course," she said warmly. "I'll be home all afternoon." I arrived later that day, parking my van in the same spot I always did. I walked up to the door, feeling nervous in a way I hadn't before. Rachel opened the door and smiled. "Hey, Alex." "Hey, Rachel." She led me into the kitchen where we sat at the table. The mood was relaxed, but I could tell she sensed my hesitation. "I've been thinking about what you said," I started, "and I wanted to say thank you again. I've never had anyone believe in me like that. Not even family." She nodded silently. "I'm going to accept your offer," I continued, "but only if it's a loan. I can't take a handout. I'll pay back every dollar with interest." Rachel smiled, her eyes softening. "I respect that. I wouldn't expect anything less from you." We shook hands across the table. That moment felt like a shift. Not romantic, not business only, but something in between. A mutual understanding and respect. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Rachel wired me the funds, and I immediately invested in a newer work van with my company logo professionally applied. I upgraded my tools and purchased better quality equipment that allowed me to take on larger and more profitable jobs. I hired my first part-time employee. The business took off faster than I ever imagined. By the end of the season, I had a steady list of clients and was booked weeks in advance. Word of mouth spread rapidly. I was no longer just a kid with a beat-up mower. I was the owner of a real company. Rachel remained my client, and occasionally, we'd sit on her back patio after I finished a job, sipping iced tea, talking about life, and watching the sun go down over her perfectly trimmed yard. I kept my promise and began repaying her monthly. She never once asked for the money, never rushed me, never even brought it up. But I insisted. Our relationship remained friendly, but professional. There were no romantic advances, no blurred lines, no drama. We both seemed to understand that what we had was unique and didn't need to be complicated. By the end of that year, my company had grown beyond anything I had imagined. I finally had enough saved to start looking for a house of my own. One day, as I packed up my equipment from Rachel's property for what had to be the 50th time, she walked over. "You've really done it, Alex," she said with pride in her voice. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. She smiled. "You would have found a way. I just gave you a little push." I chuckled. "Well, you gave me the best push I could have ever asked for." We shook hands one last time. "I'll still call you for my lawn," she teased. I wouldn't have it any other way. As I drove away that day, I knew this chapter of my life had reached a perfect close. I had built something real, something lasting. The kid with the rusty mower had become a respected small business owner. And Rachel? She remained the person who had unexpectedly walked into my life and helped me believe in myself when I needed it most.